This week, I want to talk about a topic that is really important, and it's our ego. Ego is seen as something very negative, when in reality, it's not all that negative. There's nothing that's all negative or all positive. It's one and the other. So this week, I invited Christie Garcia to talk about the 3 egos that we have. Seriously, take notes, because in this interview, she shared so many insight with us on how we behave, some of our patterns, and how we can become a better leader. Let's go to my interview. Christie, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I just love the topic that we're going to talk about today.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited. I love your energy. I love what you're doing. And hopefully we bring some great value to your audience today.
Oh, I'm sure. But before we dig into the topic, could you take a moment to introduce yourself, please?
Yes. So I'm Christie Garcia. I run a company called Mindful Choice. I've been doing leadership development for the last 10 years. And prior to that, I was had 10 years of sales in the medical industry with recruiting and client management. And it kind of just led me to this point where I started working with fast-growing organizations, Airbnb, Twitter, Sunrun, Movement for Life, a bunch of different companies that were in that growth model of change. And they really needed to just get their leaders up and running fast. And that was kind of the niche that I went into, because I saw so many of my peers go through that transition of being a really successful sales rep and then transitioning into leadership. And I couldn't figure out, why do they struggle so hard in those first 2 or 3 years of getting into management and leadership? And the more research I did, I started to realize it was really about that mindset, the ego that drives us and get us to where we're at. I win, I need to be right, I need to be liked, all those things that we are praised for our entire life until you become a leader or a spouse or a parent. And then all of a sudden, it's not about you. And so, really being able to transition into the we. And so I started to build programs to help bridge that gap, which has led to a leadership academy, the Mindful Choice Leadership Academy, which now facilitates for current and upcoming leaders to really help maximize that success quickly and effectively and get people to the finish line.
Nice. And I love it. And we spoke before we started recording and prior to today as well. And how about, yes, leadership is such a different way of thinking, so a lot of our audience are service-based entrepreneurs. So they became entrepreneur because they have an expertise, let it be in wealth management and taxing and business consulting and coaching. And with the growth of that came a team, and leadership and leading a team is a whole different skill set.
It really is. It really is. You're no longer just doing, a career you love. You are now managing people. And if you talk to most people, they say the people part of their job is the worst part. Because it's hard, humans have emotions. So no matter how good of an employee they are, you still have to deal with the human side of that employee, which creates, unnecessary drama sometimes. And really it goes back to how we communicate with each other and how we align around certain things. We're typically aligned, except for we use different languages, which creates a lot more drama and confusion.
Yes. And I also hear that that's the biggest challenge for the entrepreneurs that I coach, is like the leadership is definitely. So I really want us to go today into a very specific area, which is about the ego. Mm-hmm. We're starting to hear more and more about hearing about the ego, but it's always in a negative way. It's somebody who's like egocentric, so they have a big ego. So tell me, what are the myths around the ego? What is it, and what are the myths around it?
I love that question, because I think that's the epitome of what I hear on a daily basis. They hear I do ego managers, like, my boss definitely has an ego. Oh, I know this guy, he's a real jerk. Or, oh my goodness, yes, I know this narcissist. And it's so funny because, at the end of the day, we all have an ego. The ego is really our unconscious brain. That's how we use it in Mindful Choice, is focusing on the unconscious mindsets that run our behaviors, our thoughts, our beliefs, things that basically have us show up 95% of the time throughout our day unconsciously. And that's what's dictating our actions. So, the blame, judgment, critiquing, gossiping, all of those are ego tactics. Even being overly nice, that's an ego tactic if you're a complier, or being, stubborn, that's an ego tactic, but also, loving too deeply without boundaries, that's an ego tactic. And so we can see it for what it is without it being good or bad. I'm a big believer our ego is both our strengths and our weaknesses. When we are unconsciously using our brain and we're not being intentional, that's when the ego shows up. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just there and it's just present and it's making our decisions, good or bad. Not all the decisions the ego makes is bad. It's just, are we intentional? Could you stop and say, why did I do that? Most of the time we can't. We don't know why we did it. We just did it. We were going through the motions of life. We made a quick decision. We reacted to someone else. We had the circumstance caught us off guard. And so our emotion kicks in and we make an instant reaction, good or bad. It's an instant reaction versus an intentional conscious choice that says, you know what, this is what I'm going to do next. And so that's really how I like to look at the ego. It is strengths and weaknesses.
I love seeing it because it is perceived as something negative, but when we see it as, it's not negative or positive, it just is. Mm-hmm. It brings a detachment to it of saying, okay, well, is ego driven by our patterns?
Our patterns are driven by our ego. I think it's more the other way around. Everything we do is driven by our ego. Our ego was designed when we were kids. I mean, if you have small children, you can kind of start seeing these ego traits show up about age 2. If they're that kind of, stubborn, bossy, ambitious kiddo, it's like, that's probably going to be your controller child. And if you've got the one that just wants to do anything to be pleased, they're going to do anything to make sure, mom and dad are happy, that's probably your complier. And then you've got the protector who's typically more shy or more extreme, the really stubborn child that, tests parents and they want it their way and they want to tie their own shoe and mom's not going to help me. That's probably going to be your protector who's strong in their values, but incredibly stubborn and hard-headed. And so, recognizing that those things are what's going to get those things are what gets your child to success, but that's what's going to get you to success. How you got to be running a business or running a team or calling yourself a boss, manager, or leader, you have to have a strong ego that was pushing you to that finish line. You don't get successful without your ego being somewhat of an arrogant person, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to have confidence to get to some form of leadership role. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to be a strong initiator. And so by the time you get there, though, that's when it's no longer I got this job. I got the promotion. I started my business, but now we have to get to the finish line or I fail, right? And so it's recognizing, okay, now where are you overusing that I player, the one that got you to the success? Now we have to shift it, balance it, manage it. So you're looking at everybody and you're taking care of everybody instead of falling back into that old habit.
I so saw it. And when you explained it, when you talked about the children, I actually was able to see, because I have 2 children, like where they are. And I'm like, oh yeah.
That's them.
That's him. That's her. Like, yeah, we can see it. And we can see it also in our team members. So, which is great. So now that we have demystified that it's not bad, it's actually something good when we use it properly. How can we use that force within the ego as a positive superpower?
So the trick is to learn how to, one is self-awareness, right? You have to know what you do to even be able to change it. So the question I have is, what do you and why do you do it? When you know those 2 things, now you can take ownership of your good, bad, and ugly, and then you can start to manage back that ugly side of your ego. When you cross over, and by ugly, again, it could be that you are overly generous and you don't have boundaries, right? So ugly doesn't have to look just mean and arrogant, but we can all be mean and arrogant. So what does that look like for you? A lot of times the controller or the protector gets the bad rap as the jerk. They're the narcissists. They're the ones, are the jerks. Well, the complier protectors, can be very manipulative because they're people first. They might not be the ones yelling in the room, but their passiveness can actually create the aggressiveness of someone else. And so they're not off the hook for being angels just because they're not yelling or they don't seem like they're the jerk in the room, but their jerk is triggering someone else's jerk and it just looks more aggressive. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so it's teaching people that, you know what, this isn't bad. They're both bad. They both have negative consequences. The question is, most likely, neither of them are intentionally doing it. No one sits back and just, you know, takes without speaking up. That passiveness is the inability to speak up because they're wanting to avoid confrontation, or they're wanting to not, you know, cause conflict, or they want people to like them, so they don't want to disrupt the peace. And unfortunately, that's that complier weakness that doesn't believe in their value, and they can't add their voice because of those consequences. Where the other person, they're more worried about, they're speaking their value and their frustration and their angers. Yeah. They don't necessarily align. And so when we can actually bring everybody back, you know, kind of to this place of center where we're pulling from all three egos. So there's the complier, the protector, and the controller ego. And when we can pull from all three, that's actually when we are, you know, motivating, ambitious, empowering. We care about results, and we get to the finish line fast. You make sure that you're doing it with high integrity and holding your, speaking truth, and, you know, standing by your values, and not kind of, you know, wavering based on what other people think, but just doing what's right and what's right for everyone. And then you've got the ability to be empathetic and to hold compassion and to really make sure that the people are at that finish line with you. And that's where that balance of all three egos really plays. Unfortunately, we typically fall into one or two of the egos as dominant characteristics. And so what happens there is we are either more of the stubborn, you know, my way or the highway, or we are the micromanager who over controls to get to the finish line, or we are the one that just sits back and watches everything else happen, and we don't put our value and our wisdom into the space. And so, you know, it really is allowing everybody to show up as their best self. Through using all the strengths of the egos and managing all the weaknesses that come with that when we overuse those strengths.
That's fascinating, because as you're explaining the three egos, I definitely see in my private coaching clients, like the three profiles as successful entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Some of them have been very successful by pushing through my way and the highway, as you say. And
resiliency.
Yes. And I've seen others being very successful, and they're like, well, I'm going to ask my team what they think. And I'm like, no, the team needs a leader. Now you need to step up. It's like, it's not a people pleasing all the time, because the team also needs that security.
Absolutely.
The guidance and the leadership that you're going to bring.
Yep, you're absolutely right. You know, and that's really where, when you look at somebody who's poked your ego, and we can use language that people can resonate with right now, it's triggered you, right? So if you've been triggered and someone's kind of got under your skin, most likely they're an opposite ego. And so if you look at a complier who is the leader, who's like, oh, I want to make sure everybody's, you know, everybody's happy, and let's just figure out if what everybody's opinions are, and then we'll take all the data and we'll collaborate, and then we'll make a decision. Well, a lot of times that's great, right? That sounds like a good collaborative approach. The problem with the complier is where they stop is they don't ever make the decision. Or they make the decision, but someone complains about it, so then they make a different decision. And now you start getting that wishy-washy approach. And so people don't really know what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. They struggle to make those decisions. They struggle to give feedback. They struggle to just stand by, you know, whatever it is, like put your stake in the ground and stand there and hold it. Unfortunately, that stake gets pushed around and moved around based on who they're talking to. And it can create a lot of confusion for a team. And that's usually what triggers a controller who might be on that team, is that inability to just tell me what to do, tell me how to get to the finish line, I'm running for you. And so they want that strong, not necessarily how to do it, just tell me the outcome and I'll make it happen. Yes. And so some people need that direction. On the other hand, where if that complier is the employee and the controller is the manager, the controller says, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, get to the finish line fast. that complier might actually need more instruction. And so they're feeling a little lost or overwhelmed and they can't really put it all together. So you might get more procrastination, or you might get a little more confusion, or you might get a product that just isn't right. And that controller wants to then get really upset because they didn't follow up and, coach and lead them. Even
and
though,
could it be, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Could it be also that sometimes the controller has an idea and just says it out loud, just as in, I'm saying it, but then the one who on the team complies, takes the ball, starts running, but finally it wasn't a good idea.
Or that's probably another controller.
Oh,
Boss said to do that. I'm on it. I'm gonna get to the finish line and they'll be the hero. Does that make sense? So that's probably another controller, which then leads controllers to do this as well. Yep.
So my first step is to see which one is my dominant trait in terms of ego, which one is my, I like to see it as like doorway to playing in that field. So which one is more of my personality trait? Then once I have an idea which one is my dominant, what do I do?
So, the big thing is just self-awareness. Which ego are you? Which one resonates, and how do you get to show up and really embrace that? A lot of times people, once they start to learn about their ego, they're like, well, I know it's happening, but now I don't know what to do. Once you recognize it and you own it, the key is the owning it part, because the ego never wants you to own it. Once you are aware of the ego, you can then manage it. If you're not aware of it, the ego gets to run you, right? And so it wants to outsmart you. And so just being aware of something isn't the first, or isn't going to get you to a better place. You have to become aware of it and then own it. And then you have the ability to manage it. So once you own that and you recognize, like, okay, let's say I'll just use myself as an example. I'm a controller protector. And so I've now learned that my first initial reaction is to control. So what I do is I hear an idea. I'm the one that's going to race to the finish line, get everything done. It's going to be great. Well, as soon as someone tells me it's not a good idea or there was a screw up, then my protector will kick in and I'll get a little more defensive. And that protector goes into now you're telling me I'm wrong. Well, I'm not wrong, and I have the best ideas. So how does this work, right? And so now I become a little more confrontational, and I could be a little bit of a jerk. And so being able to own that part of me. Now, after doing this for 10 years, I've learned, okay, when someone says you're being, intense, that's kind of my cue word. That's a word I hear all the time. Well, you're kind of intense right now. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm not even meaning to be intense. It's just when I get excited, that controller passion, it raises in volume. And so I might talk louder or might sound more intense, but in my head, I'm just excited. Where to someone else, especially a complier, they might hear it as I'm angry or I'm too intense and they can't meet me and it stresses them out. Or for a protector, it could be just too much emotion and it's like, whoa, I don't even know what to do with you. And so, being able to now own that part of me, when I hear you're being intense, I can just slow down and be like, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to lose you, or that wasn't my intention. This is actually what I meant by that, right? Instead, typically what happens when someone pokes at our ego and says, well, you're being a jerk, or wow, that was kind of mean, or wow, you're being emotional. We take that as an offense and we take offense to that. And then we become more emotional, we become meaner, we start defending our stance, and we take it personal. Instead of just saying, wow, yeah, I do know that I'm capable of doing that. I'm really sorry. And getting yourself present and conscious to then manage that and have a different conversation for it. That's really that cycle of ego management. It's not that your ego is going to go away. You're going to have it forever. It will follow you. So it's just learning when is it showing up? When are you not consciously choosing your thought, actions, and behaviors? And when is your ego unintentionally sabotaging good intentions, but it's just the impact that's being created? It's a double-edged sword. Yeah.
Because now I see why we click very well. I am also very controlling and protecting, and I was like, oh.
we find our people.
We definitely find our people, and I'm like, okay. And now it explained so many things in my own team of saying, okay, yes, I can be pretty intense. Which is a good thing, because yes, I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very I want to change the world. I want to,
yes,
yay, let's go, but it can be very intense for my team.
Absolutely. And as a controller, one thing about controllers, probably everybody listening has some form of controller. You don't become a business owner without some form of controller in you, because otherwise you don't have ambition. Ambition lives in the controller. And we also have a level of optimism that so one of our gifts, right? Being optimistic, positive, energetic, all of those things. We also have this curse that image is everything. And so we might hold up this image of perfection or having it all together. And so, recognizing when are we going into a situation where that energy doesn't match the energy of the people? Controllers are task first, people second. And so what happens a lot is we want to get this done, or something needs to be fixed. We're problem solvers. So we go into a room, we're super excited, we're super positive, we're, overly optimistic. And then people are like, okay, either one, they're like, yeah, but that's not going to fix this problem we're dealing with. It's like, no, it's fine. We got this, guys. But everybody else is feeling the stress and pressure of it. We are capable of turning off the emotion. And so it takes a lot for us to feel stress and pressure. Not that we don't feel it internally, but we can numb it. And the rest of the world cannot always. And so being able to kind of match that energy is really powerful as a leader. The other times that it can get to us is when we are we bring that energy, positive excitement. Let's do this, rah, rah, rah. And then people are like, yeah, let's do it. And they walk out the room and nothing gets done. It was like the conversation never happened and people lost the energy, because a lot of times controllers move so fast that we can rally a room, but the second we leave, our energy goes with us. And so teaching ourselves how to land it, how to slow down so that energy stays and people are still inspired and motivated, empowered, even if we're not there to be the cheerleader pushing them along. Does that make sense?
So much. I hear from teams, they're like, well, there's an idea and it was like, we're all gung ho. And then he moved on or she moved on. And then it just went.
Absolutely.
And then the leader comes back and they're like, what? It's not done? Come on, let's go, And they're coming back with the same level of energy, but the entire team just went.
There's nothing there. Yeah. Yep. And then what happen, you start to building that complier employee. Even if you had controllers on your team, if you're the one that's constantly throwing the ideas, telling people how to do it and when to do it, you've now taken the innovation ability and creativity out of your team, because now they just do what they're told, instead of, bringing their ideas, bringing their wisdom, sharing in the collaboration of it. And so, there is this defeating model that comes with these egos if you're not aware of your energy, your body language, the tone of voice, all these things we know about, but we never really associate it to these ego types. And when you start to learn not just the body language, but the ego type behind that body language, it's very predictable. And that, I think, is when you can really start to shift gears of your team. Compliers, a big tactic of a complier, they'll sit in a meeting, you say, hey, does anyone have questions? And, everybody will just stay quiet. It'll be fine, right? So the leader walks out thinking everything's good. Everybody's got all the answers. They're going to go, run hard. And then you find out that one person wasn't happy. So they go tell their friend down the hall, man, this is what happened. Can you believe it? They're such a jerk. And you start the gossipy, rally the troops. And now and really what that complier is trying to do is find someone to go speak up for them on their behalf, but they want to rally the troops around that thing that upset them. As soon as they find someone else that may be more of a protector or more of a controller who will actually go speak up, now they've got that, their problem will be heard, but they look for someone else to kind of solve the problem versus giving them permission and giving them the courage to speak in that room, and, teaching the compliers that their voice matters too.
That's so interesting, because I hear a lot of entrepreneurs are like, well, I ask feedback from my team, but there's zero feedback.
Yes.
And I'm like, let's talk about emotional safety there. But,
right.
It's, do they have this, and is in their ego. So being aware as a leader, I can also go, okay, can you bring it down a bit to maybe bring the other one of gathering people's feedback and playing in these three fields of ego, which they're all beautiful. Yeah,
absolutely. And what we have to remember is unintentionally tries to hurt someone. No one unintentionally tries to ignore someone's feedback. No one intentionally tries to not give their feedback. So all these things are such unconscious behaviors that if you start pointing them out, a lot of people will be like, I don't do that. No, that's not what I did. And we start to change the story of how things played out. That's why perception can have 5 different stories when you have the same 5 people in the room, right? Because that ego perceives things so differently. And, you know, being able to teach these leaders how to offer some of these things, you know, so for a lot of times you'll hear, I'm sure you hear this all the time from your clients as well. Well, I have an open door policy. Everybody knows they can talk to me. And it's like, yes, but if you're a controller, you're walking down that hall fast, you're probably not making eye contact, or it's so strategic that you're saying hello, you're doing this, and it's so fun, but you're still busy, right? Yeah. And so people are like, I hear all the time from employees when I'm doing a big group training is, well, I just don't want to bug them. You know, they're so busy. And so, you know, that's the complier part. It's like neither of those approaches are wrong. And there's truth to both of them. And that's why leaders do have to build in time for the human side of their business. If they don't build in that time, then they feel like it's an annoyance, right? It's like, well, I'm stuck with meetings all day. Well, buffer your meetings. I get that there's a lot of meetings, but if you don't buffer them, then those fire drills actually take more time than if you had 15 minutes in between each meeting to take care of some of these human issues that don't turn into drama, unnecessary drama that turns into a fire drill, that turns into, you know, frustrations or disagreements or, you know, confusion. That all takes way more time than a 15-minute buffer on your calendar. And so recognizing how you can buy back more time by managing the human side of your business in advance, proactively.
And as a leader, I can also take 5 of that 15 minutes to go, okay, in that last meeting, which ego, where was I sitting?
Yes, that self-awareness component. What was my part? And what could I have done differently to change the outcome? You know, those are 2 questions I tell everybody to ask the second something happens, whether it's a conversation, a meeting, or an interaction, just stopping long enough to say, okay, how did that go? If there was any form of conflict issue, even if it was really great, still, what was my part? We can all play a part, right? And so if someone else, I always hear, well, this person was such a jerk, I just don't even know where he's coming from. Well, let's figure out our part. Maybe it was just 1%. Maybe it was your body language. Maybe it was your tone. Like, what was your percentage of their reaction? Because people react to things, whether it makes sense to you or not, they're reacting to something that happened most likely in that room or something prior to that room. So it's not personal, but recognizing that you might have played a part. And if you did, what is that part? For leaders, I always tell leaders, if you don't know your part, you can automatically apologize. As your leader, I should have served you better. Please tell me how I could have helped you. That might only be 5% of what's going on, but you just took ownership to help the other person manage their ego. Someone has to own the crummy side of a situation before someone else will own their side. And if you have, let's say, 5 people in a room and one person says, wow, I'm really sorry, but I think I am not showing up as my best self. I want to apologize for that and start over. You just dropped everybody's ego because you just became real. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe he wasn't a jerk on purpose. And now you've got, let's say, 3 other people who dropped their ego. So there's only one more ego that needs to be managed. And probably the next thing that comes out of your mouth, if you start really talking genuinely, authentically, and focusing back on outcomes versus tasks, that person will probably catch up too. And so recognizing that when you manage your own ego, get clear on what you're doing, you can now start to get really clear on what other people are doing and why they do it. And you just naturally bring more empathy to the game. You bring more care, and you're not in such a hurry to call people jerks, or they're lazy, they're not doing their job, they're hard to work with. And it just changes, again, how you're showing up, which is all you can truly control. We can't change other people. We can only change our own approach, which changes how other people could show up. And so that's the power of ego management.
Yes. And I can just imagine a leader going into the meeting and just say, I'm sorry.
Right.
I did not handle that at my best.
Right. Or that wasn't my intention. And I'm really sorry about that. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, imagine whether you're a parent or a leader or a spouse, imagine the power that creates in that partnership. You know, connection is created through truth. And truth is that ability to be vulnerable, to own our dark side, to say, hey, I really screwed up and I'm really sorry. The amount of trust that is built when someone can own that side of them, especially as humans, we aren't trained that. And a lot of us didn't get raised with that because our parents didn't get raised with that model. And so we don't always say, I'm sorry. The ego hates apologizing, because if you apologize, that means you're wrong. That means you have no value. If I apologize, that means you're not the best and you shouldn't be there. If I apologize, people aren't going to like me because that means I screwed up. And that's all BS. That's not truth. That's the ego manipulating and sabotaging good people's, intentions that just went south, that created an impact that they weren't intending. And so shifting that 100% by just saying sorry, a genuine sorry. You can always tell when someone apologizes not sincere, right? That's an ego sorry. Well, if I say sorry, then I'll get what I want. That's a different apology than the genuine apology from your best self.
And it's funny, side note, I actually once, not too long ago, actually, something happened at home and I apologized to my kids. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just walked out. But I should have, I needed some time, but I should have, let you know, I need a few minutes. I'm just going to go and run around the block, not just, and you saw them reacting differently. And now they will say, I need a few minutes, Mom, just to breathe it out. And I'm like, all right, but they don't walk out.
I love that. It's the lead by example, right? You just taught them how to manage their emotions in that moment. So many people will hang up on you, or they'll walk out of the room, or they'll, even if they don't walk out of the room, but their energy is like their big wall that says, don't bother me. That's, again, just as bad. You might as well slam the door in my face. Like that energy is just as intense. And so when you can teach people to walk away, but with, again, intention, right? If you're intentionally walking away, there's power in that. I hear all the time, well, I just needed a minute. Well, did you intentionally need a minute, or did your ego just react and take a minute? Because those are different, right? There's power when you intentionally say verbally, hey, you know what? This is going south. I'm probably going to say something I regret. So before I become my worst self, I'm going to go take 5 minutes. Let's figure out what just happened and then come back and reconnect. And there is power there, right? Like everybody gets to take a moment to check in. And I guarantee everybody will come back with an ownership of what just happened. It's really hard to fester when someone brings their best self to the conversation, where when you walk out and storm, now everybody's just festering for 5 minutes. You come back and you're still probably festering a little bit, or you take a day because you can't come back because you festered for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? So it's like, stop that unconscious, irrational emotion, and bring the grounded, calm thought process to the situation, and your emotions will manage themselves.
I love it. I throughout you were talking and I was like, yep, I do that. Oh yeah, I saw that. And I see it in my, in my family, I see it in my team, I see it in my clients. And it's just,
we all do it.
But as you said, once we bring awareness to it, then it's a different ballgame. If I know I have this tendency to control and protect, then I can actually do something with it, and I can go and navigate in those 3 fields of the ego and use it as a superpower.
Absolutely. And, that's the thing, right? So if you typically go to that controller protector who wants to control, who wants to, overcorrect, in that situation, you now know you need to bring the complier to that.
Yes.
Where's the compassion? Where's the people side of this? How do I connect with the human instead of just over here, judge the human?
Yes.
And that's really where we could start to bring in that balance, slow down, get curious. Easiest way to manage an ego is to get curious. Why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to them? Why does it matter to my clients, to my company, to my family? And the further away from yourself you get, the clearer your decisions will be and your response will be. Because when it's this close, when it's why does it matter to me? It's personal and we have emotion around it. When it starts to get further away from us, that emotion starts to dwindle and it no longer is a personal attack, and we start to see it for what it is. And we can now have a logical conversation that still addresses the emotion, but the emotion's not driving the conversation. You know, and I think that's the power of recognizing, okay, if my controller is wanting to judge it from this perspective, I need to bring in this one, and vice versa.
And tap into whichever I need.
Yeah.
To step into my best self.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Christie, I loved this conversation.
It's so important.
It is. And like, we're emotional beings. So we're always in these and navigating this. But once we understand that, you know, it is a superpower.
It is a superpower. Yeah.
That is how I can use it to lead myself, to lead my team, to lead my clients, to lead the business. And I can tap in, and there's this flexibility of where I can go and play.
Yes.
There's no limit.
There's no limit. And you know what? More importantly, life is just more enjoyable. Yeah. The ego takes everything so serious. It makes us so busy. There's never any time for people. And so, you know, we never get that human fulfillment. And so by understanding your ego as a boss, as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, as a community member, you start to enjoy the human side of your life and your business. And when you don't understand the ego, then you're just always kind of tightly wound. Not saying you're not enjoying yourself. You can absolutely be enjoying yourself. You can absolutely be doing great things. But I guarantee if you stop long enough and said, when was the last time I truly connected with a spouse or a colleague, or, you know, sat down and trained an employee or did a human task, it's probably not happening as frequently as you think. We want to believe that it's happening, but I guarantee it's not, because we don't look at people as tasks. And so unless we start building them into our calendars as a task, we won't make that a priority. And so before you know it, you still need to train this person on this task, and you still need to have this employee review, and you still need to go to dinner with this client, and you still need to get to your kid's baseball game, and you still need to go on a date with your spouse. And before you know it, those relationships, it's a month in and we still haven't done any of that, you know? And so being able to recognize, how do you get those humans into your business? And the only way to do it is to get that ego managed, so you don't realize that, you know, doing payroll is more important than having dinner with your family. Both of those are important. So how do you get to be successful at payroll and showing up to the family dinner table?
And I love it, because it's not or, and.
Yep.
Christie, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you, what you do, and how maybe you can help them as well in that navigation?
Yes, absolutely. If anyone's interested in learning more about their ego, you can find me at mindfulchoiceacademy.com. Again, that's mindfulchoiceacademy.com. Christie Garcia on LinkedIn, or the Mindful Choice Academy, or Mindful Choice Leadership Academy on LinkedIn as well. I have an Instagram page, mindful choice _ and Facebook as well. So you can really find me anywhere. Reach out. I would love to hear from you. You can schedule a call on my website. So let's connect. I work with both individuals and organizations, and this is a great time to get your year off to a really conscious and intentional start. So yeah, I challenge everyone to be 1% better every day.
Definitely. And I'll put the links in the video, the description of the video, and to really invite people to step into that superpower.
Yes. Yes. Own your greatness. You can't be authentically confident if you don't own your good, bad, and ugly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been so fun talking with you. I appreciate it.
I really love doing these interviews. I must say, I bring them and I create them, and I select a topic very meticulously so we can get the best insight. And there's so many aha moments that I've had in that conversation of my own behavior. As I mentioned, you know, with my team, with my family. So now that we become more aware of the 3 egos, we can navigate through that. We can see some of the patterns that we have. We can see some of the patterns that our team members have. And that is how we can change the dynamic. And when we change the dynamic, that's when we see that. so much more is possible because we bring the best version of ourselves and we bring the best versions of themselves. So I hope you liked this episode. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to receive this episode directly in your mailbox, make sure you subscribe to our blog, where you're going to get insight on marketing, productivity, and mindset tips, everything that we need as service-based entrepreneurs to succeed. So thank you for being here week after week, and I will see you next Tuesday.